My name is Jim Pinkoski. The date right now is July 2021. And for the past year and a number of months, we've been dealing with the COVID pandemic around the entire planet that's just wreaked havoc with humanity. Now, the scientists and the doctors have done a very good job of coming up with vaccinations to back this thing off, but there's one thing that has not been fixed. This pandemic has really damaged people's ability to go to work, earn a living, and keep paying their mortgages. There are many, many people that are in really big trouble because they are in arrears with their mortgage payments. There's people who have had problems being able to pay their landlords and are facing evictions. Now, the government has put a Band-Aid on the problem. Forbearance has postponed the banks being able to close and foreclose and go after people. But it has, I believe, a 15-month deadline to it. So we're on the verge of that deadline coming due, and pretty soon you will see all the banks in this nation be set free to come after whomever they wish who's in arrears on their mortgage payments. This is not a nice thing for them to be looking forward to. 40 years ago, I worked for Bank of America out in California. 1981 is when I was there. And while I was there, I suddenly got this idea for a banking solution. A solution that would permit people to keep their houses because they might face a bank who would never need to foreclose. Now, this is a big deal, folks. This is a really important idea. And over these past 40 years, since I came up with the idea, I've been working on it and developing it further and mulling it over and thinking, what it could be expanded to. Because the gist was to start with putting together a bank that didn't need to foreclose. Now, let me explain how I reached that conclusion. Back on April 26, 1982, I read this article in U.S. News and World Report, the ABCs of today's economy. On page 48, it explains how the Fed puts money into circulation. If they think that society needs another $100 million added to the money supply, they will put a $10 million deposit into one of the banks. That bank only needs to keep 10% on reserve. It can loan out the 90%. And then the next bank that gets that money deposited only keeps 10% and loans out 90%. And then the next bank that gets that deposit only has to keep 10% and loans out 90%. So basically what you have is they've put $100 million in circulation in the banks, in our society, because it grew to that from the 10 million that it started with. Because banks only have to keep 10% on reserve, and they need to loan out the other 90%, because that is the only way a bank really makes a profit. They have to loan out their deposits and charge a high amount of interest to stay in business, to earn money. But do you understand what that means? They keep 10%, they loan out 90. They loan out 90. They loan out 90 over and over again until 10 million becomes 100 million. We are here in today's world, sitting here with 90% of all the money in society is numbers that have been manifested and created out of thin air in our society. 90% of the money has been pulled in out of thin air. That's where our money has come from. Now, the next part is to understand what happens when our system of banks, all these individual banks around the country, make those loans, and the result of all of that. You have thousands, hundreds and thousands of individual separate banks. And what they do is they bring in the deposits, they can loan out 90%. So all of these banks around the country basically sign up people for mortgage loans and loan them a big pile of cash. And then after the cash is given to the person buying the house and that, it vanishes and it goes off into other banks. It's redeposited in other places. It's gone. It's out there in the world. And this singular bank sits there for 30 years or thereabouts, waiting to get its money back. And if you have a problem paying them back and can't do it, this bank will come after you and foreclose on your house and kick you out of your home and put you on the street and basically ruin your life. Now, this is a real nice setup, isn't it? Isn't this just a wonderful setup? But this is capitalism. This is the way the banking system works in America. Now, I have a poster here that I want to show you. I picked this up in the 80s in Berkeley. It's a 2-story outhouse, and I added the little names to the doors. Up top, I put the rich, and on the bottom of the 2-story outhouse, I put the poor. This is in essence what's happening within the capitalistic system we have. The rich have been dumping on the poor ever since this system was put into existence. And you have very few people up on top, call them the 1%, the 2%, the 3%, whatever, and the bulk of humanity, the bulk of people in our society are down on the lower level, getting dumped on. And if you're in middle America, you're probably on the verge of slipping even lower because of this wonderful COVID pandemic that has wreaked havoc with our jobs and our employment level and our ability to pay our rents and the ability for us to pay our mortgages. Clever poster, huh? Very interesting poster, isn't it? There are a lot of economists in the world who've been striving to find a solution to our capitalistic system. This is economist Richard Wolff's book. He's just one of many that would like to find a solution to this capitalistic system. He leans towards socialism. But basically, I'll tell you right up front, socialism is not the solution to our system. What we need to do is take our current capitalistic system and evolve it one more step. And I'm saying that we can turn this system into a completely benign and painless economic system for everybody. we can put together a system that will not need to foreclose. It also will be able to build and finance unlimited new housing. It will be able to painlessly pay off the national debt. It will be able to control both forms of inflation because we will understand why all this money is being inflated into existence. I mean, there's a solution to this system. You need to listen to me. I have a website. Several times I'll make reference to it. It's called thebankingsolution.com. Folks, you need to read the website because you're not going to be able to read all the little tiny print, in the article, but the article is posted on the website. Various things. There's a huge page of questions and answers there. You need to read the website, thebankingsolution.com. On the third page of the website, I'm a cartoonist. I like to draw comic books. I always wanted to have my own daily syndicated comic strip. So back in 1984, I came up with a comic strip called Bright Ideas. And I did a series of 80 comic strips that explained my banking solution. This one shows a money-hungry giant vice clasping onto my wallet in my back pants pocket. And I made the comic strips really, really simple, easy to read, and you can see them all on my website, all 80 of them. I tried to get them syndicated back in 1984. I couldn't get them sold to the syndicates, so they weren't printed, and all this thing got postponed and everything, and I started pulling my hair out, wondering what I was going to do about getting this out in front of people and that. Now, what year was it? 2011. I decided to write a letter to President Obama explaining my banking system. And I asked him to take a serious look at it and all that. Now, President Obama, as you folks know by this time, when he was president, he would read 10 letters a day. He would get thousands of letters a day mailed to the White House. But he would sit down, his people would pick out the 10 most interesting letters and pass them on to him, and he would read them and reply to lots of them. Here is the reply I received from President Obama in September of 2011. He wrote back to me. I was one of those 10 people that day, and he responded to my letter about the banking solution. Unfortunately, he didn't follow up on it. Things are complicated in government. You can't expect everything to happen real quick and real easy, because it just doesn't work that way. But at least he wrote me a reply. You can read this letter on my website. I've posted it there for everybody to see. Now, what about the solution? We have a system of thousands of separate individual banks across the country. They all loan out their money. They sit there and they wait for it to be paid back, and if you can't pay it back to them, they foreclose on you. Here's the solution. Now, keep in mind, we have a banking system that in essence is one system already. All these individual banks are interconnected with their computer systems because the millions of transactions that happen every day, back and forth, money travels from bank to bank to bank. They need to be joined together. They're already joined together. It's one system. In fact, years ago when the mortgage crisis happened, they had to save the big banks. They were afraid they can't let the big banks fail because they'll bring down the entire system. Because it's all interconnected. It's one system. Here's the solution to putting together a banking system that will never need to foreclose. I did this poster back in 1981 when I originally came up with this project, and it shows what would happen if you, in essence, had one bank in the country. Now, when you see in the diagram that there's only one big bank sitting there, do not think that I'm saying that you're supposed to construct one big bank in one location in America and do that with it. No, what you need to do is interlock all of the computer systems in all of these separate banks and in essence realize that they are all one system. Now you may wonder, what good would that do? What do you mean? Now, in this type of system, any mortgage loan that goes out from any of the banks that are situated in any part of the country, the money goes out, it's paid to the person buying the house, he turns the check over to the person who built the house, and that person turns around and he deposits it in his local bank. But with this setup, his deposit basically is returning to the same banking system. Now, what do you end up having in this system? What are people's accounts looking like? Every single person in this country who's buying a house has, on one side of the accounting ledger, their positive income, how much money they've made. That's positive. On the other side of the ledger, they have a giant negative balance if they're paying for a house. 30-year loans. Those giant negative balances are there for 30 years. Everybody in this country buying a house has a giant negative balance. And the bank owns their house. But if you put the system together as one system, everybody gets to have a giant negative balance. And we face the fact that it exists. It's only numbers on computer systems. Money's evolved over the centuries. It used to be emperors' egos on gold and silver coins. Then it was paper money backed by gold. We went off the gold standard in 1971. Money is now just numbers on computer systems. It has finally evolved to the point where we can actually solve the system because money itself is beyond our reach. You look at a little tiny computer chip, how do you get to know how much money's on there? There could be $20 trillion on it or $5 on it. You can't tell. So basically money has evolved to the point where it's beyond our perception. It's in a nebulous area where we can't really see it. We don't really know how to deal with it unless we can access it on a computer and see what the number comes up as. Now, in this system, when you put the system together into one banking system across the entire country, you'll be able to readjust all of the interest amounts that have been charged on mortgage loans. Every bank that gives out a mortgage loan charges a huge amount of interest. That will be readjusted. This bank is not going to be a for-profit bank. It's not going to be owned by individuals or stockholders. It's just going to be the bank. And does this bank need to pay you a lot of interest to get your deposits in it? No, it's the only bank around. This is where you put your money. There's no more competition for it. They don't have to pay high interest rates, so they are not backed into the corner having to make a lot of income. And therefore, the accounting is just keeping track of everybody's productivity, how much money they've earned, and their debt, how much they owe on the house. And instead of just lasting 30 years, everybody in the country, 30-year mortgage loans and all that, the negative balance can just stay there forever. Who cares? It's on the bank system. It's numbers. It's only numbers. Now, with this single bank, today's banks are totally afraid to make a loan to people who are poor, who can't pay the money back. Is this bank worried about getting its money back? No. As soon as the loan is made to a poor person, a house gets built, the money's given to the person who did the work, and he redeposits it back in the very same bank. This bank has its money back. Does a bank that has all the money need to foreclose on anybody to get its money back? No, it has all the money. Now, we got to understand the two forms of inflation. Number one is when lots of money is pumped into the system. It usually leads to the second form of inflation of people raising their prices on goods and services. It costs more to do stuff, it costs more to buy stuff because there's more money around and people feel that, hey, as much as you can grab, go for it. But see, the thing is, if everybody in this country is facing a bank that will never foreclose on them, no matter how much money they earn each month, why would those people keep raising their prices on goods and services? They wouldn't. So this system basically would cure both forms of inflation. Now, the big way that it cures the first form of inflation is that we inflate all the money into existence that we need to build all the houses that we need around the country. Now, what happens to the money that's paid back, that percentage of an income every month to the bank to pay back the mortgage? Well, guess what? That is money that basically vanishes back out of existence. You inflate it into existence to build the homes that we desperately need for everybody, and when it's paid back, it goes back out of existence. The solution to the first form of inflation that everybody's been afraid of for decades, if not centuries. Now, I said something about being able to painlessly pay off the national debt. We could agree to do this. Instead of taking all of those monthly mortgage payments, piling up the money, and letting it vanish out of society, we take that money and we put it towards paying off the national debt. No pain at all. And you can study how it's impacting, the other economies, the other countries, the people we've borrowed money from, et cetera. And, as long as it's not causing a big problem anywhere, why not pay off the national debt that way? Now, there are so many things within society that we really need to do. I mean, everybody's faced with, refixing the infrastructure that's falling apart in this country, roads, bridges, all that stuff. Well, there's the bank, basically, that has all the money. Now, if we can find that money and use that money, why would we not use it to fix these things? All we have to do is look for a way for that inflated money that pays for all that work to happen to be somehow uninflated out of society, so we're just not sitting around with it going up and up and up and gigantically whatever. It has to be inflated to build new homes. We can build millions of new homes and finance them for people who actually really, really need them. But there's so many other things. The space program, NASA. Why should NASA be begging for dollars to get anything done? Why should astronauts be sitting on top of rockets built by the lowest bidder? This is insane. With this bank, you'd be able to find the money to fund those things. As long as the money goes out into society, it's created out of thin air. It happens, and then you make sure you find a way to uninflate it out of existence. So it's constantly doing this, like a bellows action. This is the way inflation is supposed to work. You bring it into existence so it can do things for humanity, and then you undo it and get it out of existence so it's not just sitting there like a giant boil, waiting to be lanced and cause all sorts of problems. No, inflation is supposed to flow. That's the way it was always supposed to happen. And the first and foremost important thing in society is, what do people need in society? First and foremost, they need a home. Now, I'm not saying that you line up a whole lot of poor people and build them a mansion. You don't do that. There's a way to build countless new homes that are very, very low-key, but nice places to live. And you won't even have to cut down every tree in sight, because you can make homes out of compacted adobe bricks and that just fine. There are so many people within this American society that have been treated very poorly by the rich in society. They've not been able to participate within the American dream. And I could go down a list. The black people. You've heard people complaining about wanting reparations for their treatment. Okay, if you can't come up with reparations, you can come up with a banking system that'll give everybody a home loan, and they'll never foreclose on any of those homes ever again. The people in our culture that came from China to work on the railroads and everything, the Indians that occupied this country before we got here, that we decided to slaughter. Yeah, we were really nice people, weren't we? All as white folk. And you got the people, the Mexicans that want to come in across the border and get into our country because it can improve their lives and they can get away from really lousy living conditions in these other countries. But we set them up and block them from coming in. Do you remember that a large portion of California and New Mexico and Texas was once owned by them? We stole it from them by killing them off and kicking them out. Don't you think it's time to do something nice for those people? All they want is to come here, live the American dream, have a safe place to live. They can't live in the other countries safely. They want to come here. Now, that again is why I wrote to President Obama, because I figured he's our nation's first black president. He would really be concerned about hearing about a solution that could affect all of his people. This one bank would provide the solution to everybody within our society. Everybody would face a bank that would never foreclose on them. Why? Because we'd set it up so that's how it works. It's time for the American people to decide, what kind of bank do you want? Do you want one that makes your life miserable and can foreclose on you whenever you get in financial hard straits? Or would you like instead to have a bank that would never foreclose on you no matter what's happening to your bank account? It seems to me that the decision here to make is quite obvious. Now, you may wonder, what about the banks that don't want to give up their current power? This country is full of small banks, medium-sized banks, and really big banks. And we consider those big banks to be really, really powerful. You want to know how really powerful they actually are? If you want your money out of that bank, all you have to do is go in and ask for it. And if enough people take enough money out of any bank in this country, it's called a run. That bank goes out of business. So there are no large banks in this country that will be able to fight this idea if the American people want it to happen. It takes away a lot of their power. They are no longer in the position of being able to access the money privately, write themselves giant bonus checks or anything, reward themselves for ruining the economy and everything. None of that. That doesn't happen. The bank becomes merely an entity that keeps track of everybody's income and debt. And it flows and it ebbs and it goes up and down, and it doesn't matter because it's not causing any pain to anybody. So this bank would mainly focus on doing that with mortgages. Now there's other things like I'm getting a loan to buy a car. I'm getting a loan to buy a sound system or a TV set or get various enjoyable toys into my life. Maybe we could consider that those things still can be foreclosed on if you can't pay them. So in other words, there's a motivation for people getting jobs, staying at work, and continuing to earn money. Because if you don't do it, you're going to lose your car and you're going to lose your fun stuff and whatever. You'll always be in a house and you'll probably always be able to get food. But your internet's going to get cut off and everything else is going to go because you wanted to be somebody lazy who worked at nothing and figures out the entire system just owes you a free ride. This system is still capitalism. It will be rewarding everybody who wants to earn a lot of money and be rich. You can still be rich, or you can be on the opposite end of the spectrum and unable to earn money. But all of you will have a home. Do you understand how important that is? This is the solution to our American form of capitalism. Now, why should you guys listen to me? I don't have a PhD in economics. I'm not a professor at a college teaching economics. Why should you listen to me? My credentials are rather unique and special because I worked with the man who found Noah's Ark. I worked with the man who found the Red Sea crossing. I worked with the man who found the real Mount Sinai. I managed his museum, his very first museum that was set up in Gatlinburg, Tennessee in 1994 and was there for 2.5 years. I managed his museum. I was appointed the spokesperson for these awesome biblical discoveries that have been shared with the entire planet. This person passed away 20 years ago, and I've been waiting to see how things would progress with his discoveries. They've ended up being made into million-dollar documentary films. The government of Turkey built a visitor center overlooking his Noah's Ark site. Everything that he's claimed to have found has been verified now in the past 20 years since he's passed away. And others have worked hard to share it with the world. So I guess my question is, are there any other of you economists out there who have ever been able to do any of this stuff? You ever been able to share the real Noah's Ark with anybody, or the real Mount Sinai, or the real Red Sea crossing? You know, just raise your hand. How many of you economists have been able to tell that to the world? I have a feeling that absolutely none of you have been able to do that. Now, this is the kicker. This is the thing that will just knock your socks off and hopefully just, you'll find it stunning to hear about. Back in 1981, December of 81, when I was working at the Bank of America in Davis, California, and this idea for a banking solution came to me, the man behind me on that billboard was finding the Ark of the Covenant. The real Ark of the Covenant, not Steven Spielberg's and Indiana Jones's Ark of the Covenant, but he was finding the real Ark in a cave in Jerusalem. He said that he found it on January 6th, 1982. He found the Ark of the Covenant at the very same time I was working at Bank of America and being impressed by my banking solution. Both of these events were happening in this world, on this planet, at the very same time. And this was 8 years before I would meet that fellow and go to work for him. And it was 11 years before I would manage his museum. And actually, what's interesting here is this is my drawing that he asked me to do of the Ark of the Covenant. I am the one and only artist on the planet who is given the honor of illustrating the Ark of the Covenant for the man who actually found it. And it all happened at the same time. So I'm sitting here and I'm saying, I think God arranged all this. I really do. I've had 40 years to think about this. Now, some of the people might think, oh, how can you interlink a banking solution with God and that? Well, you have to remember something. In the New Testament, almost 1/6 of all of Jesus' statements deal with money. God really understands and cares about what's happening to us in regard to money. You can read about the money changers being kicked out of the temple courtyard. You can read about the year of Jubilee where all debts were supposed to be forgiven. Now, because we put together a banking system that basically doesn't do that, we just ignore what God says to do, you end up with a system that repeatedly causes pain and more pain and more pain and more pain on the poor people. You foreclose on them. There's probably not a more nasty thing other than killing them in a back alley that can happen on this planet. But if you followed God's directives, the year of Jubilee would have forgiven all these debts, and you wouldn't be foreclosing on people and kicking them out of their homes. So I don't know, I'm not trying to turn this into a religious talk. This is a talk about my banking solution idea, about putting together an electronic system throughout the country that can deal with all forms of inflation. It will not foreclose on you if you lose your job because, folks, you have no idea what the next pandemic coming down the road at is going to hit. This has been a very trying and very unique and difficult year and 3 or 4 months for the world to deal with. And all of us have been put in a very stressful situation, both medically and financially. We can medically solve this thing for the most part, but we need to fix it financially. So what I want to do is a nationwide discussion on the merits of this banking solution. Now, if you don't want to talk about arranging to put together a system that won't foreclose on you, then, stick your head in the sand and just, go away and leave us alone. I think the bulk of humanity in this country is going to want to discuss this. And I've been waiting for you to talk about this idea for 40 years. What were the rest of you doing 40 years ago? Do you remember what you were doing 40 years ago? Because I know what I was doing 40 years ago, and I've been reminded of it every day of my life since then. Now, this is July 2021. I just turned 71. I am not going to live forever. I want this idea discussed now, because after the coronavirus, I would think that all of you would be interested in a banking system that would never foreclose. This is important. This is very important. Go to my website, you'll see a very simple discussion of the entire thing. You'll see questions and answers. You'll be able to read my bright idea strips. And I hope you find it interesting enough that you'd like to share it with other people and contact other reporters, because I'd like to do some more articles and more interviews about this, because it's time to solve this system. This has to be solved. And this is the solution. Richard Wolff and all the guys been looking for a solution for decades, can't find it. This is the solution. And as we discuss how we put it together and how it would operate, we'll come up with a way that's really fair to everybody. Nobody's going to control this thing. I don't even want to be involved with working in it. I've worked in a bank long enough. I've paid my dues. I don't want to go back to working in a bank. I just want to help set it up so that everybody can get it running and it functions smoothly and it blesses the entire country. Because I feel that God gave me this solution 40 years ago. And now it's time to talk about it. President Biden is in office, who used to be the vice president under President Obama. And we're coming full circle. I started this project when President Reagan was in office. And that. It's time to talk about it, folks. It's really time to do it. And tell others to look at this YouTube talk. Circulate it. Let's get the hits up there. Let's get the important people hearing about it. Let's get a discussion going. Let's solve the system. If we want to kick the system into operation, it could be done next week. Because all you've got to do is flick a certain button, switch or whatever, and agree that that's the system that works, and it's already in place. You don't have to wait 18 years for this thing to be built. It already exists. If we don't need to use all the computer systems in all these separate banks around the country, we close down certain ones, sell them off. We just keep the computer systems working that can handle the workload. But we can solve this thing. It can be solved next week. Read the website. You got to read the website. thebankingsolution.com. You have to read this. You have to think about it. You have to share it. Again, I've waited 40 years. And my website has been up for 20. But up until the coronavirus hitting the entire planet, I don't think you people were stressed out enough to be motivated to want to do this. But after this coronavirus pandemic has shown you how this world is so fragile and can be ripped apart and really devastate your life on so many levels, I would think you would be interested in discussing a banking solution. So please read it. You can contact me through the website. Hopefully I'll be able to do more interviews and we get a really professional discussion going about this solution, because this is the solution to the system. If you have any further questions, read the website and that. And I don't know, folks, I've done my best. You know, I've put it out there. I've done the work. I've done the 40 years of agonizing about this thing. Now you can do 40 minutes of investigating it and decide if you really want to do something with this. Okay, that's it. That's the talk. You've heard about my banking solution. God bless and good luck, folks, because we really need to do something about this capitalistic system, and that we need it fixed. And this is the solution.